Hi, everybody. Now that we are recording in progress, I'm declaring that the January 13th, 2022 meeting of the Concord Historical Commission will begin. I see we have a lot of folks and we have a very big agenda. Couple rules. We will have a number of presentations. The first of which will be about the Scenic Roads Bylaw. After Elizabeth Hughes, who's the town planner, will make a presentation. The commission will discuss, and at some point we'll then open it up for questions and comments from the public. And I would just ask you to please use the raise hand feature to let us know you have a question or a comment. And I guess Heather, you'll let folks in know. I'd also like to introduce Heather Gill, who is our staff support, one of the senior planner for the town. And I think I need to take a roll call vote of the members of the commission. So I will ask for you, Michael, if you would declare your name and your status.
My address too? I'm Michael.
No,
Capizzi.
just your status is present.
Okay. Michael Capizzi.
This is Michael Rugg here.
Hi, there I am.
Nancy Nelson.
Alan.
Alan Bogosian.
Rebecca.
Rebecca Lemaitre, present.
Naturally.
And I'd like to introduce Jessie Cataldo, who will become a member of the commission, but she has not been sworn in yet. So with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to Elizabeth Hughes, who is the town planner for Concord, who will give a presentation about the scenic roads.
Thank you. At this time, I'll share my screen. So if you can confirm, all you see is the first slide in the slide deck, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So thank you for having me at your meeting. I'll try and make this brief because I know you have a very full agenda. So just a quick background, not so much for the commission, but for the people who are on this meeting. The Scenic Roads Act is enabling legislation from the state. It was first adopted in 1973, and it allows, upon the recommendation of either a planning board, historical commission, or natural resources commission, to submit to town meeting for town meeting approval a scenic roads bylaw. For everybody's information, the bylaw must list all of the roads that are to be designated. A road cannot be added to the scenic roads bylaw unless it is a vote of town meeting. Additionally, the state statute allows the town to assess fines for non-compliance, and that it also appears in the warrant because the town has a non-criminal disposition bylaw, and that bylaw would need to be updated to include in the list fines for scenic roads bylaw. What the Scenic Roads Act states is that any repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving work that requires the cutting or removal of trees or the tearing down or destruction of stone walls or portions requires a public hearing with the planning board. There's also, most people know, a public shade tree bylaw, which is a different enabling legislation from the state. If a tree is to be removed, the required public shade tree hearing would be consolidated with the planning board hearing so that there's only one hearing. Concord has a really long history of discussing the Scenic Roads Act and whether to adopt a scenic roads bylaw. First appearing in the 1987 land use plan, recommended the passage of a scenic roads bylaw. It again appears in 1995 in the 2001 historic master plan for the historical commission, recommending evaluation of the scenic roads bylaw. It appears again in the 2005 comprehensive long range plan, either as an action item to adopt official roads policy dealing with universal historic and environmental sensitive policy within that roads policy, and goals to protect and maintain historic and cultural scenic vistas, including farmland, scenic roadways, stone walls, road widths, major trees, and village centers. So within that comprehensive plan, it kind of hit all, at least the two major things for the Scenic Roads Bylaw. It also appears again when we talk about the Envision Concord Bridge to 2030 comprehensive long-range plan. In this plan, it goes through and provides different recommendations and action items, including the priority heritage landscape recommendations, which include scenic roads as a critical issue. Again, it references a recommendation to review that 1994 roads policy in regards to defining historic landscapes. Currently, there are 9 public roads that are being proposed. I'll give everybody a second. Falls Hill, Barrett's Mill, Garfield, Liberty Monument, Ornack, Strawberry Hill, Sudbury, and Westford Road. When there is a proposed project, want everybody to understand that private property will not be affected by the enactment of a scenic roads bylaw. The proposed warrant article only deals with public roads and the public right of way. The bylaw is only triggered when a property owner proposes repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving work done within the public road right of way, which requires destruction or removal of a stone wall or portion and the cutting or removal of a tree. That's it. There's no other triggers. Those are the only triggers for a private property. The bylaw will not apply to cutting or removal of trees by the town in connection with right-of-way maintenance, or if the tree warden deems a tree a hazard. So including that in the draft bylaw allows the town to continue to maintain the roadsides in front of people's yards within the public road right of way, allows CMLP to continue their annual line clearing maintenance and any hazards, or if a tree is diseased, dying, the tree warden can deem that and it can just be removed. Part of the process with a scenic roads bylaw is, should the bylaw pass, the planning board will work with the historical commission, the public works commission, and stakeholders on developing rules and regulations, scenic roads rules and regulations. What those regulations will do will outline the application process, the public hearing process, and provide guidance to applicants on the evaluation process that the planning board would use. Listed here are some of the elements that go into evaluation criterias: public safety, environmental values, historic preservation, scenic and aesthetic characteristics, whether there's reasonable alternatives for if somebody is, an example given is a developer has purchased a very large farm field, and there's a stone wall that goes the length of that field, and it's going to be developed into individual lots. The planning board can work with that developer to see if there's alternatives. Instead of having 3 individual driveways cut through that stone wall, there may be opportunities to have a common driveway to limit the disturbance of that historic wall. So what happens from now to annual town meeting? There are over 100 communities in the Commonwealth that have already adopted a scenic roads bylaw and have already developed rules and regulations, including some of our, many of our neighboring communities. So myself and the senior planner will begin gathering those. Town council has also weighed in on the bylaw and has different examples that they feel are quality examples of those. And we will meet with town staff and stakeholders to talk about the different rules and regulations and the elements of those. And then the senior planner and I will develop just an initial draft of the rules and regulations so that people can have an understanding of, you know, what they look like and how they evolve. Should town meeting pass the warrant article, what everybody, well, most people don't understand, but what happens when either a zoning bylaw or a general bylaw, a scenic roads bylaw is a general bylaw, the town clerk has to certify those votes and submit them to the Attorney General for approval. It takes a minimum of 3 months. The Attorney General has 90 days in which to approve or deny a bylaw. They also have the ability to just inform town council that they're not done and give themselves another 60 days. So that process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So during that time frame, town staff, including Public Works staff, CMLP staff, will complete the drafting of the rules and regulations. We'll then meet with Public Works, Historical Commission, the Planning Board, and different stakeholders to review those draft regs. And then ultimately, rules and regulations, a noticed public hearing will need to be happen for the Planning Board to formally adopt those regulations. So that's a very quick summary of a scenic roads bylaw.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So I first would like to open it up to members of the Historical Commission to ask questions of Elizabeth. Any clarification from her or additional questions? Does anyone have a question for Elizabeth? Alan, Nancy, Michael, Jessica?
I'd just like to know that what if one of the roads is a state road? Would the state have more influence over that, or does it matter?
Yeah, no, good question. The state statute does not allow a community to designate a state route as a scenic road or a like
Lexington Road.
Lexington Road. We could not designate Lexington Road as a state road. And Route 62, Main Street, could not be designated as a state road. And that's specifically stated in the statute.
Yeah. Other questions from the commission?
Oh, I would say that Route 2A also would not be eligible
Yep.
in Concord or anywhere
Ray
else.
as well.
Right.
So Melissa, I didn't know if you wanted me to quickly go over the conversations that I've had with town council on the bylaw. Also, Melissa and I met with Public Works staff, and then last night met with the Public Works Commission, and town council has provided language that can be included in the draft warrant article to exempt Public Works and CMLP from the annual roadside maintenance, and provide the tree warden the ability to deem and remove any trees that are a hazard. So I didn't know if you wanted me to bring that up real quick.
Yeah, you should. And then I can just say to the commission, this would make a bit of a little change in the draft warrant article. And because of that, we wouldn't be voting on the article tonight. I will need to poll all of you to try and find another date between or after the 24th of January, because the planning board wants to review this first and before February 2nd, which is when the warrant article closes. But this issue that Elizabeth is bringing up was very important. In conversation last night with the Public Works, we're not here, we do not want the Scenic Road Bylaw to impede their ongoing maintenance that they have to do for the town of Concord. And that's why we chose this. So Elizabeth, yes, please. Go, yeah.
So at this point, do you see the draft bylaw with the highlight?
Mhm.
Okay. I'm still not used to working on two screens. So the highlighted language right here is the language that town council recommends for including in the draft, in the warrant article. Pretty self-explanatory. And following the presentation last night to the Public Works Commission, I've made some suggested edits to the explanation just to clarify some things based on questions that were raised. So I will forward this draft document to Heather, and she can distribute it to the rest of the commission and then post it to the commission's webpage.
I would just like to note that it's in the rules and regulations, it would be very likely that what we would combine any hearing that involves a tree with the tree warden anyway. So this just specifically this exempts that the necessity of that hearing when it's just basic maintenance by the Public Works Department. But normally, if this bylaw passes, when the issue would involve a tree, we would have a joint meeting with the planning board, right? I just want to, so if anyone, yeah.
Elizabeth, forgive me if you touched on this already, but yesterday you talked about how you all have been in touch with other towns who have implemented Scenic Roads Bylaw. And I thought that that was a really interesting piece of information in support of this. And if you could speak to that a little bit to the other towns' experience.
Well, I'll speak because I did call.
Melissa, sorry.
Yeah, it would be Sudbury, Bedford, Ashland, Wayland, Sherburne, Dover. I spoke to 7 different towns. I called about a dozen. And I asked them basically 2 questions. One was, is this a burden for you and your department? And do you think it has made a difference? Is it a good a piece of control, a review for the roads that are involved? And every one of them said it is not a burden. They did say, however, yes, it does require an additional layer of review. One town said it's 5 or 6 hearings a year for their DPW. But they also suggested that they felt it was a good control. And one department head told me that he said, frankly, he was shocked that Concord did not have it. He assumed Concord did. And I would say, that's a compliment to Concord and the leadership that we've had in our planning and public works departments over the years, that they have taken very good care of our roads. They do honor the historic past of Concord. But I think what we're concerned, those of us who've been working on this bylaw, is going forward that there is increasing pressure on the town to develop every piece of property that they can, to straighten roads, to accommodate developers in a way that I think threatens the integrity of this historic Concord. So that's a primary reason why we're looking into doing this. We were concerned that it would be a burden, but judging from the conversations I have had, they've said no, that it is not. Any other questions from members of the commission? Then I think Nancy, I'm sorry, Nancy, yes, Nancy.
I just have a basic observation. I think there's different ways to attack this or to address it, not attack. Sometimes basic maintenance can be very harmful to trees. In a case this year that was very unfortunate was the trimming of trees to accommodate or to make sure electrical wires weren't damaged. And I think we see that along other parts of town where arborists are not conducting the work, or where it's very kind of overly aggressive. So I think that's a conversation with the public works people perhaps, but a blanket exemption is a little bit concerning, but maybe we can address that another way.
So I would ask Elizabeth, because I used to live on Lowell Road and my trees were victimized by that, but that was CMLP, it wasn't Public Works.
But same kind of
yeah.
idea.
Yes, I understand.
Same overarching authority, I think.
So Elizabeth, can you help us?
So definitely, I think there can be a much stronger dialogue with CMLP and how their line clearing happens, and a better way to go about that. But only because I have personal knowledge about what linemen go through, since my husband just retired after 25 years. There's a very fine line between when they do line clearing maintenance and if they don't, and there is a storm and people's power is out for 5 days. So it's kind of a fine line, but I do agree that there is definitely room for conversation and education, because the example that Melissa gave was after my husband retired. So so
my experience also probably was after.
Probably. So I do think that is important, but the amount of work that they have to do is so significant that I think if there wasn't this blanket exemption for that, it would be a significant burden to have them go through that. But I do agree.
Did you say emergency? Because emergencies, I think everybody would agree would be exempt. I'm not remembering the
Well,
exact.
yeah, no, emergencies are emergencies, and
But
if
the bylaw doesn't say emergencies or urgent.
well, no, it's
or anything
to
like
mitigate, eliminate, or avoid hazards. So
Yeah.
if there's a hazard tree or a tree on the wires, it's gonna, that is a hazard, it's gonna come down. But
Yeah.
the annual maintenance that CMLP has to do
That's what I'm
is
talking about.
it's significant. And if they had to go through a public hearing process for that, that would be a burden.
Well,
But I do think there is room.
Yeah.
There is room for conversation and education.
Okay. Let's remember to pursue that.
Well, one question for Elizabeth, is this something that could be spelled out in the rules and regulations? Because that's where the meat of this would be,
Right. Oh, that's a good point.
right?
It can definitely be part of the rules and regulations. But I also think that there is room for coordination between CMLP, because Nancy is correct. They do not have an arborist. So we now have the tree warden, who is a certified arborist. We also have the land manager in natural resources, who is also a certified arborist, where before it was only Peter Flynn, and so I do think there's room for that collaboration on
Yeah.
those types of things.
Good. Thank you.
Any other comments from commission members? If not, then I would like to open it up to, well, first of all, I guess I should ask, or no, I don't. I guess we will vote on this. We will have to have another meeting. So I just ask the members of the commission to consider the language that Elizabeth has just put forward, because we will need to discuss that at a meeting again, between January 24th and February 2nd, so we can get this on the warrant, get this as a part of the warrant. Heather, yes, you have a,
I think everyone except Nancy could make Wednesday, January 26th work. So that would likely be the meeting date.
okay, if that's all right with everybody, then we would meet at 7 o'clock on January 26th, okay? Okay, that's a deal. Okay, so then,
That's now okay with me. Sorry, I'm late unmuting.
you are the only one. Is there
No,
is there any way you can participate even by phone?
no, I said it's okay with me now.
Oh, well then,
Okay.
good.
All good.
All good. Okay, thank you. So then we will take this up and vote on this on the 26th. So now I would like, if that's okay, to open this up to members of the community who are here tonight. And I think, Peebo, your hand has been up for a long time. Are you there? Not sure he's there anymore. So Heather, how about you let people in? I'll let you handle that.
I know, would you like to speak next?
Well, how about Andrew Feinberg? I see him.
Actually, Randy.
I'm
Okay, Randy. Okay,
Hi.
hello.
Hello.
I guess, please actually state your name and your address, please.
Sure, Randy Feinberg, 112 Balls Hill Road. So first of all, thank you for the work you're doing and for having us, the members of the public, attend. I had a question, which is, you mentioned that the law is triggered when there's a change requested on the public road right of way. How do you define, is the public road right of way literally just the street, or does it also include some amount of footage, if you will, that people might consider their front yard? Is there a standard amount?
So there is no standard amount because public roads have been laid out, since 1800s. So many of these older roads are of what the term is, a variable width. And so they could be, 40 feet wide. In some cases they could be less than that. So what happens, and what happens now, is if somebody wants to propose a new, let's say a new driveway, they're required to go through the Public Works Engineering Division to get a road opening permit or a driveway approach permit or a right-of-way permit to do that work. They are required to show their property boundary, which is basically the edge of the public right-of-way. And that would be how that determination is made for some of the very older roads. Many roads, the engineering division has layout plans. So when the county commissioners were laying out roads, they have plans for those. And when subdivision roads, we have subdivision plans from like 1918. Those actually have the layout, what's called the layout of the road right of way. So it is not just the pavement. It does extend, most roads do extend for some distance beyond the edge of pavement. But that distance varies based on the road.
I would want to find out.
How is there a way to find out for each of the roads you're considering what that distance is?
So what I can try to do, I have to work with engineering, is for these 9 roads, see if they have layout plans for all of them. And I can get them posted to the Historical Commission. Has a dedicated Scenic Roads Bylaw webpage. Currently, there's an interactive map on there where people can see all the properties that have frontage on one of these 9 roads.
Mhm.
There's also the 1852 map that the commission and its researchers have used. There's actual research on all of these 9 roads on that webpage. So I can work with the engineering division and at least get layout plans for what they have posted up there. It will probably be a little cumbersome because each sheet can only handle a certain distance. So, a very long road could have multiple sheets. So I may be able to also work with our fantastic GIS analyst who did that interactive map, and maybe we can embed images on various sections in that map. So that'll take a few days, but I'll see what I can do with that.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Jennifer, Jennifer Bradle? Although it looks, there you are.
Yes, that's correct.
Hi. So yes.
Hi. So we're at 1234 Monument Street. We're on the corner of Balls Hill and Monument Street. And it's my husband who has a couple of questions. This is JP.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Recognize some of you. Nice to see the rest of you. 2 quick questions. One, really just a logistical one. Timing wise, the ATM I think is May 1, if I'm not mistaken. And the document mentioned a 3 to 6 month, I think, process subsequent to that in the state for whatever might get ratified. So if that's the case, hypothetically, this gets passed and 3 to 6 months after that, it gets ratified or not. So that puts us in, Q3, Q4. Is there a standstill on any relevant activities between now and then? In other words, so take Balls Hill, for example, where we are. I would assume that since this is on the docket between now and then, nothing could happen that might eventually be deemed to have been prohibited by the consideration now on the table. That's my first question. And then the second one is, there was an arguably very relevant carve out for, safety related issues. And I just wanted to make sure that in drafting the language, you thought through the concept that if someone develops an area in a way that then drives usage that creates a safety issue that didn't previously exist, then you've kind of created a backdoor to getting around any provision that might be put in place.
A loophole.
So for example, you have a road today where there is no scenic issue and it's not protected yet, or maybe it even becomes protected, but then someone does a development that creates a safety issue. Well, then you've put in place the dynamics for approval of changes that would not have been allowed before, if that makes any sense. She's shaking it ahead, so yeah. I can restate that if you want.
No, I understand. So your first question deals with timing,
Yeah.
and I'm much more familiar with the timing that it deals with zoning bylaw amendments. So I will definitely get input from town council on how the timing of a general bylaw goes into effect. So for like a zoning bylaw, it's when the legal notice is published for the public hearing. And I'm not sure if that's the same standard for a general bylaw, but that's definitely something I will look into as far as that timing, if there is that hold that gets put in place and when that happens. For all of these questions that I can't answer tonight, and I apologize, there is a frequently asked questions document that's posted to the Scenic Roads Bylaw page. So for like this question, I will keep updating that document with these questions and the answers. It might take a couple of days for me to get the input from town council and get the answer correctly. But I think that's probably the most efficient way to answer these, and so that everybody can see the answers. So just, keep looking back, and the current date on the FAQ right now is today's date, because I made some revisions based on the Public Works Commission's meeting meeting last night. So just as questions come in and it gets updated, you can look at that and see. Your second question. So I I was in Boxborough for 9.5 years, and they've had a scenic roads bylaw for a very long time. It primarily assists with the individual development, and whether it's a driveway or the example I gave, a farm field which now got carved up for 3 house lots. Those can be carved up through a separate process that doesn't require a public hearing. It's just a meeting for the planning board, and the lots get created. For a project, something where it's whether it's a new subdivision or whether it's some type of commercial development or a larger project that requires a special permit either through the planning board or the zoning board of appeals. That element of safety, depending on the size of the project, becomes an inherent part of that public hearing process and the review process. What would happen is that if that project also triggers the Scenic Roads bylaw, you would have again a consolidated public hearing, so that the conversation on the scenic road aspect is included in the conversation for the whole entire project and its development. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, I think it addresses it. I mean, specifically what I'm thinking of, and I know some people on the call are familiar with, is the proposed development for the Audubon group at the end of Balls Hill. And, there's this potentially circular logic where it creates a safety hazard that didn't exist before by virtue of the volume and nature of traffic that would be on the road. And so what I'm trying to get my head around is, if Balls Hill is designated a scenic road, that wouldn't allow for certain kinds of development or modifications, I should say, but for the creation of a demand for additional traffic and everything, then it seems to me to be something that would run contra to the intent of protecting the road as a scenic road. So I just wanted to make sure that that's thought through in the language, that you shouldn't be able to create a safety issue to enable changes that would otherwise not be allowed.
Exactly.
And I guess that would be part of, as you said, sort of the greater approval of development. I'm just flagging it as something, so in case it's relevant for any language, since this is it sounds like it's a bylaw that's a work in progress.
Well, the bylaw itself isn't a work in progress, the rules and regs, but for the example you gave as far as that timing aspect, a project comes in and that project gets reviewed, and all the elements of that project, whether it's traffic, public safety, site plan review dealing with lighting, noise, landscaping, all of those items go into that review, either by the planning board or the Board of Appeals, and sometimes both, depending on which parts of the zoning bylaw get triggered. As part of that review, the safety element comes into play, and I think how the Scenic Roads bylaw will help is to basically have that continue that and foster that conversation about what would need to happen to the roadway for this project, and how those impacts for those improvements to the roadway can be addressed in, a sensitive and contextual manner. But the review of the project itself is separate from the Scenic Roads Bylaw. So the safety issues and all of that is a much more comprehensive review by, engineering, fire department, police department, and it goes into all the elements of a project. And what is the traffic, what are the uses going to be, what are the time frames, how is all of that going to be addressed? They're kind of, they will be woven together, but they're definitely two different processes, with one being much, much larger and more in-depth than just a scenic roads review. So I don't know if that answers your question or.
Sorry, unmuting. No, that's helpful. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'll cede the pitch pipe to somebody else.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Brannigan, John Brannigan?
So Melissa,
I'm sorry. Yep.
I know the first person in line is Pierce's iPhone.
I've asked, yeah, I don't know if I asked before. Peebo, are you there?
Yes,
Okay.
So would you have your question, please?
the yes was from John Brannigan. Who are you
Oh,
addressing? Pierce?
Well, Peebo Brown, I asked him earlier. I'm not sure if he stepped away. So I'll come back to him. So Mr. Brannigan, yes, please. Would you
John Brannigan, 15 Rollingwood Lane, abutting Old Road to 9 Acre Corner. 3 questions real quickly. One is there any impact on planning that the roads committee might have for sidewalks along any of these roads? Does this bylaw impact such plans, or would it restrict such plans if a request came in from a neighborhood in the future? The second question, if I could just get clarification from Elizabeth on the question of trees, is the proposed control on trees based on what's just in the right of way, or does it include trees that would be visible from the historic by road? And then the third question is any impact on zoning or future building permits along the proposed these roads in particular?
Okay. The first question regarding sidewalks, it doesn't restrict anything. What it does is, if a neighborhood wanted a sidewalk, I guess petition Public Works for a sidewalk, or Public Works, through the Complete Streets program was going to add a sidewalk someplace, what it would do is they would come to the planning board for a public hearing for that design, and Public Works would, the first element is public safety. So many roadway projects and sidewalk projects, and whether they add a bike lane or have to take a tree down for sight distance, or need to flatten out a dangerous curve. Safety always takes precedent in anything in the community. whether that's a scenic roads bylaw, a zoning bylaw, a general bylaw, safety takes precedent. But what it may do is, as Public Works goes through and designs that sidewalk, working within the public road right of way, possibly working with abutting property owners, whether that sidewalk has to be, right up against the road and just a straight shot, or whether it can, meander around, a large tree, or so it provides that opportunity for that dialogue and to look and see if there's other options than just, removing every tree just to put in a straight sidewalk. To your second question, the Scenic Roads Bylaw only deals with trees within the public road right of way. It is not like the Historic Districts Commission, where within a historic district, if it's visible from the public way, you're going. This is only trees that are within the public road right of way. And then lastly, the Scenic Roads Bylaw doesn't impact zoning or impact building permits. If somebody were to, build it, so I go back to the example of the developer building three new house lots and 3 new driveways. It doesn't impact his ability to. He has a by right to build 3 new dwellings, but again, it goes back to having that public hearing and that dialogue with that developer, and looking at the different options, such as can you do a common driveway instead of 3 new cuts through I'm going to say like 400 feet of historic stone wall. So that's what it does. It doesn't impact somebody's by right ability to do what they want to do on their private property.
Thank
And I
you,
think-
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just had one comment, and thank you for answering those questions. One comment back to the commission members, just if you would keep in mind the informal survey earlier, where the other towns said there was no burden on them based on this bylaw. It sounds like there is a burden in terms of these extra steps that the towns have to go through.
Yeah, the burden though is another review. They haven't, all this would then be at another planning hearing.
I'm being very simplistic. I just want to clarify there is extra work involved for volunteers and for the town. So just if you could keep that in mind when you're voting.
Well, yeah. Thank
So
you.
Thank you.
So I just do want to emphasize that it's a very narrow focus of when this would be triggered. There are many things that Public Works does, complete intersection redesigns, where there may not be a single tree that needs to be removed or a single stone wall disturbed. So the Scenic Roads Bylaw would not be triggered. So I just want to be really clear that it is a very narrow focus of when it gets triggered.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mr. Vecchio, are you there?
Yes, hi, I'm Jim Vecchio. I live at 568 Barracks Mill Road. And I have 2 questions. One is, what criteria was used to select these 9 roads as scenic roads? And the other question is related to whether or not a tree might be designated as something that is not necessarily scenic. So in other words, what criteria is used to determine whether or not a tree should be removed or should not be removed?
So I'll answer the second question first, and then I'll turn it over to Melissa and her team. So the part of the rules and regs will better establish those criteria. But what I can tell you from my experience in Boxborough, so going back to the example of somebody building a new house, or tearing down a small house and building a new house and wants to relocate their driveway. If there's if there's no opportunity for somebody to, let's say there's a very large oak, and they want to cut that tree down, because over here, you might not have to cut the tree down, but that driveway is on a curve, and it becomes, would be a safety issue for them pulling in and out. Well, once again, safety will always be, one of the first criteria that looks into that. So there isn't an opportunity to shift that driveway and have it be, in a safe location. So that's kind of, like one of those elements that gets looked into it. There are some people that want a circular drive and have 2 driveways. In some cases, that, depending on the road you're living on, or again, sight distance or things like that, that might be appropriate. But in general, if somebody wanted a circular drive and it required to, cut down trees, that would be another conversation that, would happen, and saying, well, you're going to have to, to do that, you cut down this tree, and it really will change, the fabric of the road. It's not, it's not every, if there's a little tree, so there will be within the rules and regs those guidelines to help people make that determination, have that conversation. And then I'll turn it over to Melissa for the rest of that.
Oh, you're muted, I think, Melissa.
I'm sorry. We pulled together a team of researchers, historic people who have history backgrounds, including David Wood, from the Concord Museum, former president of the Massachusetts Historical Society, museum director from the Concord Museum, and we have, again, about 10 of them, and thought about what would constitute an historic road for Concord. And the criteria, which follows actually what a lot of other communities do, geared it to, in one case, one element would be a map, which was the 1852 Walling map, which is found in the Concord Library. It's also at BPL. Many of the roads were laid out before 1852, but they at least had to appear in the 1852 map. Also, the general contribution of scenic vistas and stone walls and trees to the road, built features such as historic buildings and historic properties. So in the case of, I believe, Barrett's Mill Road, clearly Barrett's Mill was one of the early roads. It is obviously the site of the Colonel Barrett farmhouse, where the British, it was the destination for the British when they marched out to Concord. Some other roads like Westford Road has 1600 aged homes on Westford Road. Liberty Street is another one, which is very, obviously very famous here in Concord as it leads up to the mustard field. So those are the kinds of criteria that we used. We also really looked to distribute them around the town of Concord, not just say around the Northbridge area, but over on the other side of Route 2. I hope you can, on the page, the dedicated page that Elizabeth has referenced on our Historical Commission page, there are documents on every one of these 9 roads that we are proposing, extensive historical research that was done by these folks. And they constantly are updating it. I can say that because I think we got a new update even today. And so, you know, if you went to the page, you could read about the history of Barrett's Mill Road, for example. I hope, I can't see you anymore. God, we've got so many people in this, but I hope that has helped answer your question.
Yeah, it's very helpful. I was wondering whether there's any limiting factor or whether it would be possible that we would see year after year more roads being added to the scenic roads list. And I was just wondering how extensive this might become over time.
Well, that first of all, the road, these are the first 9 roads that we are proposing before town meeting. They have to pass, obviously, with this warrant article. In the future, if folks want to nominate a road, it would have to be nominated by the planning board, the historical commission, or the conservation commission, and they would have to pass at town meeting by a majority vote. I will say that some of our neighboring towns have 30, 40, 50 roads. But also we are late to this. The enabling legislation was established in 1973. Carlisle actually adopted the scenic road bylaw that year. So most actually of the roads in Carlisle are designated scenic roads. This is something really that Concord, as Elizabeth noted at the beginning, has looked into for many, many years, and for all kinds of reasons had not yet adopted it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Gerard, I'm sorry. David?
Yes. My name's David Garrett. I live at 166 Monument Street. First, a comment. I am very much in favor of maintaining the scenic beauty of our roads in Concord and the stone walls, and I hope they never disappear. But my questions are, from my understanding for this is really just making the planning board consider scenic roads, given that it only refers to public property. So I don't really understand why they can't do that already. So why do you need the extra bylaw? The second question is, it sounds like this bylaw must have come up many times before, since, as you say, the enabling legislation was in 1973. Why has it not been put in place up to now? And the third thing is, it appears that, since it's in the public way, that the town already has jurisdiction over that. So what are we actually really adding by having the bylaw? Is it just a forcing on the board? And lastly, a question on the fines. I don't understand this. What's the point of $100 fine? Surely it should have at least 2 zeros after it. We might as well delete it at $100. And I don't understand what it does anyway, because by definition, for somebody to do something here, it must have already been approved by the planning board. If it's approved by the planning board and somebody does something against the planning board, there must already be other regulations that designate they can't do that. So what's the point of this fine anyway, even though it is a ridiculously small amount of money? That's my questions.
Yep.
Thank
So
you.
I can answer the first question, the third question, and then the fourth question. I'll leave the second question up to Melissa. First question: the planning board and basically any board or committee or commission is their jurisdiction is it starts with certain enabling legislation through the state. So for the planning board, their 2 main items are the State Zoning Act, Chapter 40A, and the State Subdivision Control Law. And both of those enabling legislations allow the planning board to do what they need to do as far as zoning and subdivisions and developing rules and regulations for subdivisions. And so a community can't, so the planning board can't just and the town can't just decide they want to have the planning board do something. The actions that a town takes have to be, somewhat embedded in the ability through some enabling legislation. If that ability isn't there, there's this whole separate process called a home rule petition, where a town can develop something, petition the legislation to allow them that jurisdiction to do it. So that's why, the planning board just can't do this on their own. And that's why there's this enabling legislation. The question about public works, again, it's that the Public Works Commission and even the Public Works Department and the Engineering Division, it's somewhat of the same answer. So somebody submits an application for a driveway approach permit. Engineering can work with them to say, well, we'd like you to do this, or we'd like you to do that. That's as far as they can go. What the Scenic Roads Bylaw allows, it gives the planning board that authority to say, instead of 3 driveway cuts through this stone wall, we want you to have a common drive and not have 3 cuts, only 1 cut. That is significantly different as far as their authority to be able to direct somebody to do something different. So I don't know, does that answer those 2 questions?
That does answer those 2 questions. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
The last question was also brought up last night with the Public Works Commission. They had the same question. The state enabling legislation specifically has a line in there that says a city or town can enact fines for non-compliance. And it's not just non-compliance if somebody got approval to do something and they don't do it the right way. It's if somebody does something and never even bothered to ask, ask for approval. There's sadly, there are many people that feel, ask for forgiveness instead of permission. The issue is the state enabling legislation says, yes, a town can have fines, but it can't be more than $300. What happens though, and this is something that happens with most of our non-criminal disposition fines, is that each day is considered an offense. So your first offense is 100, your second offense is 200, your third offense is 300, and every offense after that is 300. So that's every day. So if you're not in non-compliance, for 3 days, that's $600. If you're in non-compliance for 4 days, that's $900. And so it can grow pretty quickly if somebody's done something and they're going to have to develop a plan. They may have to get a surveyor to do a survey plan. So it can add up quickly. So it's not just $300.
Okay.
And then your question about why it hasn't passed, alas, I can't really answer it because I haven't been, until this year, this is the first time I've started working on this. I just know that it has been brought up in study after study and roads policies and whatnot. I think I can say that we have been fortunate. We have had a public works department that has respected and honored the history of Concord and cared very much about the roads and road policy. But what we see as an historical commission, just with the demolition delay bylaw, there's increasing pressure. There's for developers to maximize the land here in Concord. This is a very popular place to be. And we are concerned about going forward. So this is a proscriptive effort to create another regulatory tool that would be in place to help create another avenue for conversation before, as Elizabeth has described, a stone wall gets taken down and 2 or 3 driveways get put in, and the character of a historic road is lost. That may not be the answer you wanted, that's the best. I can't explain it. I don't know why. Again, I would mention that when my conversation the other day with the DPW chief of a neighboring town, who said, I'm shocked that Concord doesn't have it. But I attribute that really as much to the fact that we have had wonderful folks in Public Works and the Planning Board. But you don't know what's going to happen in the future. I would draw attention, as I did last night, to what Mass Department of Transportation is considering to do with Route 2A, the Battle Road. Many of you may know that that's an historic road. It overlays a good portion of the original Battle Road that the British marched out to Concord and back to Boston. And Mass Department of Transportation is talking about putting sidewalks in and splitter islands and blinking lights that would totally change the character of that road, which, by the way, is a National Scenic Byway. It is also distinguished as an All-American road, which means it's a destination unto itself. So I think every generation needs to be vigilant about preserving the character of its community. And we have one of the most historic towns in Concord, and our roads are a big part of that. So it's a long-winded answer, but I hope it helps.
Yes. So I actually hope this bylaw passes. And I just want one final clarification question I want to ask is all the beautiful stone walls like are along Monument Street, Barrett's Mill Road and things like that. Approximately, are most of them in the public way or just a few of them?
So again, I mean, it kind of varies, but for these older roads, stone walls were the definitive boundary between, what somebody's private property was and what, the public way was, or property boundaries between 2 properties. So many of the older walls more than likely will be either slightly within the public way or actually be that boundary of the public way.
I'm glad to hear that.
You can see a newer wall, and so for newer walls, like there was one recently constructed on Barrett's Mill Road. Those newer walls will be offset onto private property because Public Works would not allow a new wall to be constructed within the road right of way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tiedemann, you've been very patient. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hi, Ed Tiedemann, 656 Barrett's Mill Road. I'm actually glad that you were talking about stone walls because I have some stone walls on my property. But one of the things that I was going to ask, what about maintenance of items that are in this public right-of-way area, such as stone walls? Or can the owner of that property sort of repair those stone walls? Because they do have problems over time, or what about the ability to plant trees now, when one dies or something like that in that scenic right-of-way area? Can one do that also? That's my first question or area. Second one is, are we going to add any signs showing that these are, I'll call it Concord Scenic Roads, or not? No, she's saying. But I think that actually would be a good idea, because I think an awful lot of, to some extent, is the symbol of doing this sometimes as much as the real bylaw of doing it, because it puts people's mind in a certain way. But overall, I think I'm quite supportive of this so far on what I've heard.
So
Elizabeth?
I will, I'll answer your question. Nothing in the Scenic Roads bylaw prohibits a property owner from repairing their stone wall. It is only if a stone wall is removed or destroyed, or a portion of it is removed or destroyed. So that, repair away. As
Good.
far as planting of a tree, if a property owner wants to plant even now wants to plant a tree within the public road right of way, you do need to get approval from the tree warden through Public Works to do that.
I mean, it's difficult because we don't quite know where that private right of way is.
Well, where the public right of way ends.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where the tree warden would work with that property owner, work with Public Works Engineering to define where the edge of the public road right of way would be, and also work with that property owner to make sure that 15 years from now that tree doesn't become either an issue with sight distance, or you're not going to plant a tree that grows 100 feet tall if it's right under the utility lines. So they work with property owners who want to do that. The Public Works also has a public shade tree program where it's called I don't know exactly the words. It's kind of like a private public shade tree. But you can ask Public Works, say, I will allow the Public Works to plant a tree. There's really kind of not enough room in the public right of way for a tree to survive and not get hit with a plow or so. But I think a tree in that location would be fantastic. Public Works will plant a tree for you on your property. It becomes a it is a public shade tree. They work with that property owner saying, okay, well, this is a public shade tree. You can't 10 years from now cut this down, but we'll plant it and you'll basically care for it. So that isn't already an alternative, but the planting of a tree would not trigger the Scenic Roads bylaw. Does that answer your question?
No, those have answered my questions. Well, I thank you on answering that way on the stone wall. Occasionally I have people going a little too fast on Barrett's Mill Road who end up in my stone wall.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tiedemann. Thank you very much. So thank you, Elizabeth. I don't see any other hands. Heather, are there other questions? Again, we're very grateful that so many of you tuned in tonight to hear Elizabeth's presentation and the various questions. There will be public hearings about this that will be posted.
Yeah, there will be a public hearing because so all zoning bylaw amendments, if everybody remembers, they are on the planning board's public hearing for annual town meeting. This is a general bylaw, but because it is basically planning board jurisdiction, I do believe that this warrant article, the public hearing for it, will be at the planning board's public hearing, which is March 8th. I want to make sure. So that is just the public hearing for town meeting.
Yes, March 8th, correct.
March 8th. And then lastly, if anybody has a question, I might not be able to answer, by email immediately, but please feel free to send an email. And as I said with the previous question regarding of when this bylaw would become effective, those questions that I think everybody's probably thinking in their head will be added to the frequently asked questions document.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Elizabeth,
you.
so
right.
much. I think if there's no other questions about that, we need to move on. This took a long time, but this is very important, so I don't regret any of the minutes. I just know that there are some folks here who are here for a couple demolition reviews, so I am grateful for your patience. Thank you, Elizabeth, very much. I'm sure we'll be seeing you at another meeting soon. So I would like to invite the folks representing the 38 Davis Court. We will be having a demolition review hearing. Just a reminder that the demo delay bylaw was established to create a public process that aims to preserve and protect significant buildings and structures here in Concord. And we will review the property's characteristics and determine whether the structure should be preferably preserved or allow its demolition to go forward. If the structure is demolished, question to the members of the commission, will the town lose an architecturally or historically important building that might be detrimental to the town's heritage? If we as a commission, however, determine the structure to be preferably preserved, this would result in a 1-year delay that starts from tonight. So I'd like to invite, I'm sorry, please speak up, the folks who are here for the 38 Davis Court.
Sure. Hi, my name's Matt Seppi,
Hello.
and I'm at 4 Fletcher Road in Westford, Mass.
We'd ask you to please just, excuse me, just describe the reasons why you are asking to demolish the structure.
Sure. Just a quick introduction. I work in Concord quite a bit, and I'm familiar with a lot of the houses in the town, and my grandparents grew up in West Concord, and my dad grew up in West Concord, and I don't take lightly coming to the commission requesting to do the demolitions. And, you know, I am aware of the bylaws and have avoided looking at multiple homes because I felt like they weren't ones that should be demolished, that they could be preserved in a fashion that would be appreciated by, you know, someone different type of, like a homeowner that would want to do it as an end user project and not something that would be getting done as someone as myself doing new construction. I do feel in the Davis Court situation, it didn't really have a lot of historical attributes to it. It's in a historical location, but looking through the macro information that had to help me out with, I mean, there's nothing really particular on this house that's mentioned in that information. It's more just about the area that it's in. And I think, and secondly, I know it's not justification for doing the demolition because every old house is going to need some work and it needs updating. But this particular dwelling has significant structural issues that have happened in the house. And there's been a tremendous lack of maintenance that's been able to be performed in the house. So it's in really tough shape structurally and in the interior of the dwelling.
I'd like to ask, I think, Nancy, were you the person who went to see the structure? Am I
Yes,
right?
I was. And I, of course, did not go inside, although I did run into an occupant. I'd be very interested in knowing more about the structural issues because we often hear about irretrievable structural issues. And then in some cases, happily, the home ends up being rehabilitated and this preserving the scale and the style of the existing neighborhood. So we often hear that buildings are not retrievable. So I'd be more interested in seeing some documentation of that. And I do think it's an interesting neighborhood that has a certain character. I know that it's starting to change, but it is an interesting piece of Concord's history as a modest neighborhood with you know, workers housing. So not just
I
not just
did-
major estates.
Sure. No, I did take some photos of the interior to try to sort of catalog and preserve some of the things that I thought were somewhat interesting in the house. And along with that, I did take, some photos that tried to document some of the structural items that were going on in the house, which would probably be pretty challenging to be able to just look at my photos and be able to see those structural items without actually performing an on-site visit and
Yeah,
looking at the-
very difficult without an engineering report, although you may be an engineer. I don't know.
I
But
am
some
not
of the
an
features
engineer.
some of the features of the house from the outside and now looking at the interior, this,
Like that's a photo
this
of the floor
could-
joists, for example, that are in the house.
yeah,
In a very,
not very clear what that's telling us, but yeah, okay, but that's my opinion. I wish we would see a little more clear professional documentation of the state of the interior, and the house in itself, I think, could be wonderful again for modest housing, but not for major development.
Are there other comments from other members of the commission? Alan, Michael, anyone? Other questions of Mr. Seppi? No, I thought I saw someone's hand up. Oh, Mr. Simon? Well, if the commission has no comments right now, yes, Mr. Simon.
I'm Robert Simon. I live at 13 Davis Court. And once the neighborhood became aware of this application, there was a lot of email, since we're, I think, a rather close neighborhood and we really care about where we live. I, for one, think the house is lovely. It is in disrepair. It is a mess. I could see from the pictures. I know that in 2001, the house that we live in at 13 Davis Court needed a number of things done to it. And we kept the character of the house and modernized it and did some structural things and expanded it a little bit. And, I think it left the neighborhood really unscathed in terms of its character. I'm not sure what Nancy means when the neighborhood is changing. So let's hold that one for a minute. But I do think there is history here.
Oh,
It's not from the 1700s or necessarily, but late 1800s. There were a number of people who moved here, and my understanding of it is a lot of those people were the working people of Concord, the people who served others. And this neighborhood still is one of the most affordable neighborhoods in town.
Yeah.
And so I think for some people, it's a gateway. So we do have rental properties here, and people come, they live here for 6 months or a year or 2 years, and they buy property when they feel settled here. So I like the idea that people can come to Concord and rent and then move within the town. It's a gateway, as I say.
Mm-hmm.
And
just,
sorry.
And finally, Nancy, I'm curious what you mean by it's a changing neighborhood.
I thought I totally agree with everything you just said, and that's why I would vote for it to be preferably preserved. I think that these types of neighborhoods are sometimes overlooked and are fair game for larger residential structures. I thought I saw a couple that were quite a bit larger. I might be mistaken. So basically, I agree with everything you said strongly.
Thank you.
Rebecca, did you have something?
No, I just wanted to point out that I think also that it's in this case, maybe more a case of neighborhood and road it's as a whole, as opposed to the specific house. Robert, actually, when we moved to town, we looked at a property to rent right on Davis Court. So I've been inside a couple of them. And I just want to say that I appreciate getting the neighborhood feedback, because I do think in this case, even if the house is not the most spectacular house to be preferably preserved, it's a part of something bigger than just itself. So
You're muted. Melissa, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. I would just like to speak up and say, part of this is preserving a neighborhood as well. And it is really important when neighbors do come before us. I'd say the success stories that we've had in preserving a home have become because neighbors spoke up. And one of the things we do ask, rather than tear the house down, considering rehabbing, relocating it, preserving it in some way, to restore, maintain the house and maintain the character of the whole neighborhood. So I personally would ask.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
No.
I do recognize that. And I mean, in 2008, I did a preservation and we actually won an award for historical preservation for a project we did over on Pine Street. So I just, I'm just bringing that up to a point because I understand, again, I don't take it lightly to come in and ask to remove a house. I mean, I think if there is attributes to it, that it has the appropriate bones to it to try to save it. If it was something that the commission felt that they would like to preferably preserve, if I could, is there any possibility that you could consider the detached garage to be removed? Because that's in challenging shape. And also, if Melissa could, there's a rear bump out that's on the house that is in extremely bad shape. And if I could get a rear photo, I could point that out to the commission. I could probably share my screen, or if I said, Melissa, I'm sorry, had to bring that up.
Okay.
Yeah, I took pictures of that.
Yeah, I had submitted some to, is there, Heather, do you have one that's from further back, maybe? So you can see it's this low section on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
That section there.
Yeah.
Yep.
When was that added? It looks significantly different, so. I'm not sure when that was added. I couldn't find it via the permits to find out when that got added. It's over a crawl space and it's just completely rotted and I'd call it uninhabitable on the inside anyway. That section of the house. Yeah, got it.
So if the commission did feel that the house was something that they would like to preferably preserve, I would just ask maybe to consider that bump out in the detached garage as, I mean, to salvage those, you just have to take it all apart anyways. Like, I'm not really sure how I could salvage that back section or the detached garage, really.
I think both of those are interesting ideas.
Yes.
Really, very interesting.
I would agree. I do see there's a couple other folks. Heidi, would you?
Yes, it's actually Stephen Judge who would just like to make a couple of comments. We're at 76 Bedford Street, so our property is adjacent from the rear of that 38 Davis Court.
So my name is Stephen Judge, and I live with my family at 76 Bedford Street, which, as my wife was just saying, is adjacent to the backside of that house. And I've done a lot of work on that house. I would say that I'm surprised someone says it needs to be torn down, because I can guarantee you it really does not need to be torn down. It's very habitable.
Yeah.
Most of the work that would need to be done would be cosmetic. Yes, there are some areas that would need to be reframed, possibly that bump out in the back, which is a bathroom, would need some major work. But other than that, it's structurally in very good shape. I put a new roof on it myself, probably 35 years ago, and replaced a lot of the framing and did a lot of structural work and replaced a lot of the trim. And I also know that the former owner, Hank, who has unfortunately passed away, Mr. Reed, has put a new furnace in there with a new hot water heater, removed the asbestos. So yes, it does need cosmetic work. That is undeniable. But it is a nice, nice house. It is very, it's sort of like the essence of that whole street, actually. It has some nice trim, some nice details. The garage is not great. I can vouch for that. But the house itself is in really need of cosmetic work, not demolition.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Kameza?
Yes, I'm Bill Kameza, and Maureen and I have lived on this. We're at 28 Davis Court, and we've lived on Davis Court for 39 years. So we've been around there for a long time. And we've added to our property as well over the years, carefully. But I've done a lot of research on the neighborhood over the years, all the way back, frankly, to the Ice Age, if you want. But fascinating, I think that's the oldest house on the street. And I believe it was the house that was occupied by the original developer of the street, Mr. White, Patrick White, who ended up buying the land from Davis, developing the land, building the house that we live in now, the duplex we live in, and then himself eventually selling that property to others, and then eventually it would sold to the Reeds. So in that sense, it's also significant. It's a pretty important house for the street.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Thank you. Mr. Garrod?
Yes, David Garrett, 166
Garrett.
Monument Street. I just hung around for this hearing because I went to the one before, so I just put my 2 cents in worth. I'm looking at the picture of the house on Google at the moment, 38 Davis Court. And just a general comment, I can't see anything special about the place. What I would be more interested in is if somebody wants to take it down and put up something else, then fine. But surely the question should be what's going to be put up in place of it. Because if a nice tasteful house was put there that fitted into the neighborhood with the same size, then great. But if the plan was to tear that thing down and put in some McMansion, then no. So that's kind of my input. So, I can't see anything special about that place. And if you replace it with a nice looking house that fits into the neighborhood with the same size, then great. That's my comment.
Thank you. I just would point out, however, we evaluate these on the merits of the house itself. It is not our role to ask even what is going to be replacing if a house was torn down. So we are just judging this on the merits of the property itself.
So what's special about this place? I'm looking at a picture of now. I can't see any redeeming qualities to it.
I think Mr. Kameza just gave us some excellent reasons. The history of the house. I mean, part of our role is to help preserve the history of Concord and Concord's neighborhoods.
And probably not the more majestic houses that you'd find on other streets. But this is a neighborhood with very solidly built houses. Craftsmanship that isn't always found in modern houses today, and details. You only saw a glimpse of some of the ones on the interior. This was really quite a pleasant house, and I think the windows, the front porch, other details that we haven't really seen on the inside, but you can get a hint of that. And it's a simple house, well proportioned, and appropriate in the neighborhood in a genuine way, as opposed to having to replace it. It could be improved, sensitively updated.
Thank you. Mrs. Kameza?
Hi, thank you.
I'm not sure I'm saying anything that hasn't already been touched upon, but I would just like to reiterate, as Bill said, he and I have lived in the neighborhood. In fact, we are abutters of this property. We've lived here since '84. And we deeply love our neighborhood because it has heart and it has history that is actually been transmitted orally. We have learned from the Kerrigans, who were Maureen Reed's parents, who lived across the street in number 35, that when they first moved here in the earlier part of the 1900s, the neighborhood was inhabited by both Irish second and third generation, also Sicilian, Italian, second and third generation, the Lombardos, hold on a sec, the Lombardos, the Rotundo families were all raised in this neighborhood. So there's a living oral history, and it's in a sense associated with that house. As Bill said, it was the first house in the neighborhood. The neighborhood represents a historic moment or a historic location where new immigrants were integrated into the community of Concord. And as you've mentioned before, workforce housing was provided here. We have several stories of individuals who lived here in more historic periods that if time were not an issue, I'd love to share. And in present terms, it is true, the relatively uniform scale and architectural style of the houses on Davis Court is well worth preserving for its aesthetic quality and its historic value. So we very much respect Mr. Seppi and the work that he's done in Concord. We also respect the family, and what the Reed family needs to do is something that we would certainly honor. But I would just like to add my voice to those who say that the place could be rehabilitated and could preserve those values on the street. So thanks.
Thank you. Miss, where'd you go? Barbara Lynn Davis, yes.
I live at number 21 on the street, and I echo what my neighbors have said. I just wanted to add that I was chair of the Historical Commission, not Historic Districts, back when I first moved to Concord, so maybe like 2005. And I just wanted to add my reflections that I remember at that time thinking, I'd like our little neighborhood to be a historic district. I was thinking about what people are talking about, how cohesive it is. But times have really changed. And back in 2005, it was such a modest neighborhood. It was sort of like, well, you know, it's too modest. It doesn't warrant being a historic district. And I put a little one of those signs on my house that says, you know, the carpenter who built it. And I was sort of the first silly one who did that on the street. But I think times really have changed, and there is a lot more attention now on more modest people whose stories aren't the big names, immigrants. And so maybe the moment for this neighborhood has come finally. And I think we all have pretty powerful feelings as you're hearing about the street, its history, and our experience of it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Other comments from other folks? Members of the commission, Nancy?
Would you like to entertain a motion to preferably preserve?
Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Michael? So I think that we're prepared for a vote. Then yes, all in favor of
Don't we roll call?
Nancy's. Yeah, so I will call Michael. Oh, yeah, I can't hear you. You're
Yes.
muted.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Alan?
Yes.
Let me see. Rebecca can vote tonight, right, Heather? Or do I need her to vote? I guess I don't need her to vote.
I would vote aye if you need me.
Okay. Well, I will vote aye. So I think that we've got four members of the commission. That's the quorum.
I want to be.
And Alan's a full member too.
Yes, and Nancy,
To
your
be-
vote
We
is,
want to be counted.
yeah, I'm sorry, Nancy,
Aye.
your vote?
Aye.
So that is 4 votes taken and 4 ayes. So that means we are voting to preferably preserve the property, that the 1-year delay would start from today. You can come back to us. Heather, you're going to have to help me with this, but I think we would entertain, if you have other plans for this, some, I don't know whether we could entertain whether or not you could tear down a portion of the garage, or I don't know. I have that kind of,
I was just gonna ask if in the motion, were we allowing the demolition of the garage in that rear addition, or is that something you would like to have a further discussion on at a future meeting?
in other words, you could come back proposing to tear down the garage and or the addition. Is that what?
Or if the commission doesn't have an issue with those 2 items coming down, it can be part of the motion that
Tonight.
the house is preferably preserved. The garage and that rear addition, however, can be demolished. I don't know how the commission feels.
I guess I would like to delve into a little bit more the architecture of this house, because if you take away that little section off the back, this house almost looks like it's come out of the Sears and Roebuck catalog back in the day, without that little bump out on the back. So if we could get a little bit more information about the architect, the architecture,
Okay, so
origins of
perhaps
this
a
house.
future meeting.
And I'll
Yes.
second that. I'll second that also.
Yeah.
You should do that.
So I think that we will continue with the motion as is, and Mr. Seppi, if you would be willing to do a little bit more research on that, you could come back to us with a request to for the garage perhaps in the addition. Does that
Okay.
seem reasonable?
Yes, that's fine. I appreciate the commission's time tonight. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. And thank-
Unfortunately, I'm here again for 1053 Main Street as well.
Oh,
Even though I had
That's right.
thank you, and thank you
I know
to,
I had mentioned I don't take it lightly, but yes, 1053 Main Street is one. And just for the record, I don't own either one of these dwellings. I'm here working as a proposal for something to do moving forward on the property, but I do not own either one of the properties yet.
just before we start on that, I just wanted to, hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank all the folks from Davis Court who spoke this evening. Again, it really matters to us when neighbors show up and speak on behalf of their neighborhood or a property within the neighborhood. So I really want to thank you for that. So I will now turn over to Mr. Seppi and a new hearing for 1053 Main Street. If you would like to describe your reasoning for wanting to tear this one down.
This house actually does have a little bit more history specific to the house, based on the Macris information. It's not just documentation about the area, it's about the actual dwelling itself. I would be here in really with similar comments related to the condition of the house. I don't know if Heather could bring up photos of it or which commission member may have performed the site visit, but it's definitely in need of quite a bit of assistance and rehabilitation. And the cost associated with doing that is very challenging in comparison to, if you're able to move forward with the new structure.
Could you run through those again, Heather? I remember these pretty well. I like the pool. Yeah. How would you?
This dwelling's actually owned by the Mandrioli family, which many of you probably know, that own the grocery store where Woods Hill Table is located. And
Yes.
used to get sandwiches from the parents that ran the
Right,
supermarket way back in the day.
Can you talk a little about the structural issues as you understand them?
This one actually has structural issues, but not, I know, I don't want to get into a contrary debate, but not as significant as what is at 38 Davis Court. I mean, this has a lot of the sagging floor situations and things of that nature, which you'd expect to see in dwellings that are this old, but the foundation of this house, it definitely needs work, but in comparison to Davis Court, it's probably not as bad structurally.
Well, I actually went to visit it. It's actually, because I live at Concord Green now, it's right across the street. It was right at the entrance right across from the entry on Main Street into Concord Green. It really has a wonderful history. I mean, it was built by the Sheehan family that actually owned a lot of the land here where Concord Green is. They had orchards across the way. It was also structure built and ultimately rented to the workers for the industrial West Concord. So it has a wonderful story, in addition to being the home where the Mandriolis live, which are a very popular family here and well-known in this side of town. It also is very consistent with the rest of the houses along the road. I personally would just hate to see this house go, because it is part of the neighborhood along the opposite of Concord Green. These homes were built at around the same time by the Sheehan family. They were brothers.
Same time as what?
In the this originally was the 1860s. It was first,
Yeah.
And then later, it was rented, I think more like in the 1880s. There was the harness company built, Boston Harness Company in West Concord, so some of the folks worked there. I know it's expensive to redo this, but it's expensive to tear something down and rebuild it. So I personally would like to see it preserved and efforts to restore the house. At the very least, I absolutely think it has to be documented. It's one of the requests that we would have if we allowed it to be torn down, but I actually would prefer that it not. That's me personally. I'd like to ask other members of the commission. I particularly like to ask you, Alan, you're a West Concord fellow. Do you have any particular knowledge about this house?
This one I don't. No, I don't. I'm not too familiar with it, but I thought it was going to be sold off in the affordable housing at one point with the town. That's the only thing I knew of. But other than that, I don't.
Okay. Any other, Michael, Rebecca, any other comments?
No, I concur with your overview of the house and certainly think that it has a lot of character and certainly history. And I do think it contributes very strongly to the area that's in. I went over and visited it. I debate the issue of structural, but I don't want to go there. But I don't think it does have any serious structural deformities, but I do think the structure should be saved and rehabilitated and be kept as an integral part of that area of Concord and that street.
Nancy, any more comment?
No, are you taking public comment before we vote?
I will. I see a gentleman. I see, whoops,
Three
Mr.
people.
DeMille.
Four
Mr. DeMille.
4 people. Oh.
Well, I see 4 across. So Mr. DeMille, my screen is, I use the farthest on the left. Yes, sir.
There we go. I'm Benjamin DeMille. I'm the trustee for the property next door, 1045. And I also grew up there. I actually just have some safety questions, not really whether you go through with the demolition or not. Because I got my 89-year-old mother living next door, and the house is covered with asbestos shingles. So I missed it in the paperwork. Do you know what the prospective demolition date would be?
There's
We
no
haven't- Yeah, we
There's no-
haven't even
permit.
considered doing that yet.
Okay.
That's why we're here tonight, to ask the permission to do that, but we have, no, we
Okay.
don't have any prospective date or
Well.
anything like that nature.
You'll be removing the asbestos before you smash the house over or whatever you're gonna do, aren't you?
Well,
We
it's
would
not
have-
at all, it's not clear that he's going to get a permit. So,
Right, but if he doesn't, then nothing changes. There's no safety issue.
There's very strict rules about removal of asbestos materials. So I think.
No,
that
I
would-
understand that, but before the house is knocked over with a backhoe or however they do it, somebody
Yeah.
has to come in and remove those shingles, because otherwise you get dust all over the place.
No, yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I don't know. Alan may know more about that than.
Necessary permits have to be filed with the town, and
Yeah.
proper demolition
Methodology.
protocol has to be met before any of that starts. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about that now, because we're not, he's not at that point.
Okay, but if you get to that point, the shingles are removed first.
He follows the protocol.
Which I think is.
Okay. I couldn't find anything about liability insurance, whether he has any, Mr. Seppi?
Yes, I have liability insurance, yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what the policy number is and where it's from?
I'd prefer not
I
to do
think
that in a
I think
public
that's a little
forum.
bit premature.
Yeah.
I think we're here for a different reason.
You
at
prefer
this
not to,
point.
it's insurance, nobody files anything until you
but
back
Mr.
into my
Clark,
garage next door.
Mr. Seppi doesn't have a permit to tear the building
Right.
down at this point, and he is not the owner.
Yes,
Okay.
Right, So
But-
it's kind of a premature conversation.
If there was ever a time when I was
Yeah.
going to work on the property, I'd gladly come over and I could meet with you and provide you information that you would need, and if that appropriate time ever came up, I would be happy to do that.
So if you get the permit, I can get this specific information.
Sure.
And regards to the asbestos, you have a hazmat rider on that?
I am
Again,
appropriate.
again, we're not there yet. I mean, he doesn't even have a permit to tear the building down. That
Right.
is, that would be, if, that would.
I'm
you
just
know,
trying to get the information now, so I don't
Yeah.
have to chase this all the way through.
No, but it's kind of a premature, the question is premature, Mr. DeMille, because he hasn't even filed for any permits with the town.
Okay. Prior to today, I never would have thought of my neighbor. I grew up there. I never would have thought of my neighborhood as historic.
It is.
I have no idea why. It's on a loud, busy road. There's an enormous condo complex across the street. And the tour buses I saw lined up at the Old North Bridge never seemed to swing by my house.
Lucky.
It's just a house. All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Pearson, I'm sorry. Yes, hello. Thank you.
My name is Ann Peasons. I live next door to the property at 1063 Main Street.
Yeah,
So-
nearly.
And I'm actually joined here by a good few neighbors, I think. And hi, Matt. Good to see you.
Hi,
So
nice to
first
see
of
you
all,
again.
I want to say I certainly don't begrudge the Mandrioli family the desire to sell or develop their property. I was really interested to read the historical documents that were part of this application. There is an enormous amount of historical significance to this stretch of street. And my husband and I have lived in the area for 22 years, and what we love is the working class nature and history of West Concord. And I think this house really represents that in a huge way. So the house definitely needs to be rehabbed. Something needs to happen to it. I would hate to see it torn down. I do have two specific questions, and Melissa, shut me down if this is not the venue. One question is the application for demolition mentioned the house and the detached garage. The property also has a pool house, a shed, a tennis court. If a demolition grant is, or permit is eventually issued, does that cover all structures on the property, or Matt, what is the intent there?
Melissa, would you like?
Well, I would have to ask, I have to ask the same question because all you have is the request for the house. So
I believe it was for the house in the garage. The town does require a separate demolition permit for a pool. So if you go to remove an in-ground pool, you have to get a separate demolition permit for that.
Okay, so is that not included because it's not part of the historical nature of the original house?
I wasn't under the impression that the pool and the pool house was like that. It was just the structure in the garage.
Okay. And then my second question is, so between where I am at 1063 Main and this property at 1053 Main, there is a paper road on the books in Concord. So a road that exists on the plans but was never paved. If this house were demolished, what impact, if any, would it have on that paper road? And the reason I'm asking is because we rely on it for access from Main Street. We have no other access. So is that taken into consideration as part of this review?
I would have to ask you, Heather, not to my knowledge. I think we only are talking about the house and the garage. That would be another issue. I think, is that?
The Historical Commission only has jurisdiction over determining if the existing dwelling or structure is preferably preserved or not. Any other zoning implications does not come within their jurisdiction.
All right, thank you. I know other neighbors are waiting to ask questions, so thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Max?
Hi, my name is Max. I live in 54 Staffordshire Lane. It's like next door. And I'm walking on the street like every day. And I really enjoy the house appearance and how it's fitting into the neighborhood. I agree the house needs some like repairs, but I would prefer to keep the house and keep the feel of the neighborhood. I don't have questions. I want to just say my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Charlene, Dorothy? Hello?
Hi.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Charlene Dorothy. I'm also here with my husband, Greg. We live next to the property at 1065 Main Street. We're in the duplex on the other side of Anne, who just spoke. And we don't have any specific questions, but would also just like to speak out with some of our neighbors who have also spoken, just to say that we love this neighborhood and didn't realize how much history there was here until this issue's come up in the last few years, and we've started doing a little bit more digging into it. And just love how all of these houses kind of have a similar feel to them when you drive along Main Street. And so we would hate to see, something go up that wasn't in that same kind of style as what's here. So we would really prefer to see the house refurbished. And again, we know that that's a lot of work, but we think that that is in keeping with the integrity of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there other comments from the community, neighborhood, neighbors? Anyone else from the commission and second thoughts? Would someone like to make a motion? Michael?
I make a motion that we issue a demolition delay on the structure.
So we deem it preferably preserved?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second? Thank you, Alan. So I'll give a roll call vote. Michael, your vote?
Aye.
Yes. Alan?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. That's 4 present full-time members and 4 yes votes to maintain that, to designate the house as preferably preserved. So that would mean a 1-year delay starting from this evening. Where is Heather? God. You know,
Here.
there you are. Well, it's easy for you to say. So, Steve, so
It's changing.
thank you, Mr. Seppi.
Could I
for
thank
your
you?
time, and I
Yes,
think
I'd like to thank the commission for both listening about both houses. I appreciate your time. If I could make one comment, which is not the commission's responsibility in any way, shape, or form, but it's just something I'll make it quick. But when I work in town, there are a lot of folks that own the homes for whatever reason, have not been able to keep up with them appropriately maintained. And they're not aware of the bylaw that won't allow the house to be demolished. So when I meet with folks, they say, we know we haven't been able to keep up with the house, and we understand it's probably going to have to be knocked down. And on multiple occasions, they're banking on selling the house for an assisted living situation or something of that nature. And then they find out they're not able to sell the dwelling to somebody because of the bylaw, someone that would be able to knock it down. So it can impact them, what they'll be able to sell that for if someone has to go in and do a rehabilitation. So I don't know if they could put something in like with the tax bills or something like that, just to make folks aware that their house falls in that criteria so they could plan accordingly, because I've run into it on multiple occasions in speaking with folks in town.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I guess, we have to consider how, it is on the books. We, at town meeting last year, we changed some of the provisions of the demolition delay bylaw. For those of people who attended and who, I'm not sure. I'd have to, confer with you, Heather, a little bit about how we would let people know. I can see it works both ways. We are trying to preserve the character of Concord. The number of tear downs across the town is alarming to some people. Others are pleased to see it. Our position is we're trying to preserve the historic character of the community and the structures, particularly a structure that is contributing to the neighborhood, which this house does, and the previous Davis Court property. I certainly understand the predicament people find themselves in when they can no longer afford it, and a delay is a year. Sometimes you can come back to the commission and we can reconsider with different provisions. So that's a possibility.
No, that's fine. I understand both sides of it. And again, I appreciate the commission's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It is very difficult. Thank you. And again, thank you to all the neighbors who spoke up. So I'd like to.
There is a hand raised, Melissa.
There is. Okay. Whoops. Oh, Margaret.
Hi. So I was only going to put on that, which is we are not trying to put a stick in the spokes of the neighbors trying to sell the property, but at the same time, absolutely, we did not know as neighbors that we were in a historic district until this issue came up. So that's also some of why my brother and I were so worried about the safety and not the historic value. We did not know that we were in a historic district at 1045 Main Street. That's all.
You're not located in a historic district.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's local historic districts in town, and those are overseen by the Historic Districts Commission. This commission is separate.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to explain our confusion coming in with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think with that pass, I don't know, is Rick Fries here? Because our next item is about the Civil War Monument Task Force, just a report on that. If you are, would you please unmute yourself and speak up?
Yes, I'm here, Melissa. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. So we just would like to hear about the decisions that the task force has made and about George Dugan.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to appear before you tonight. Let me just provide a very brief synopsis stating the case for honoring George W. Dugan as Concord's 49th fallen Civil War soldier. On February 16th, 1863, an ad appeared in the Boston Journal recruiting men of good character to become part of the newly formed 54th Massachusetts, the first Black Northern Regiment in the Union Army. 4 days later, 44-year-old widower, farmer, George Dugan, probably traveling by train, went to Boston to the recruiting station, which was located at the corner of Russell and Cambridge Streets, essentially diagonally across from where the government center is today. He met with the recruiting officer, Lieutenant Appleton. He signed the enlistment papers. He was promised a bonus of $100 for enlisting. That bonus not to be paid until his term of service was completed. He was also assured that he would receive a monthly wage of $13. That was later on reduced by the Lincoln administration to $10 per month for all Black soldiers in the Union Army, $3 less than white soldiers. In July of 1863, Dugan was part of the first regiment to storm Battery Wagner, located on Morris Island off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. That regiment, since they were the first among 7 to storm the fort, suffered significant casualties, 42%. 52 of those men were identified as missing in action, Dugan among them. None of those men left that sea-locked island. None of those men returned home. In 1908, the Concord Soldiers and Sailors Report identified Dugan as the only native man of color to go off to war from this town. And in 1932, the Massachusetts Adjutant General's Office, the highest military office in the Commonwealth, identified Dugan as, quote, supposed killed at Wagner. In 2014, I petitioned the town manager and the select board to honor Dugan as Concord's 49th fallen Civil War soldier. On August 16th, 2021, the select board formed a 5-member task force charged with a mission of potentially making a recommendation to the town to replace the existing tablet on the Civil War monument that honors 48 fallen soldiers. And also to come in with a recommendation for the care and preservation of the monument itself. So we anticipate making a report to the select board in February. And that report will recommend replacing the existing tablet on the monument, 48 inches by 66 inches by a ½ inch, with a new tablet, adding the name of George W. Dugan, 54th Massachusetts Volunteers. His name would appear between fallen soldiers from the 53rd and 56th regiments. The tablet would be the same size, the same composition, the same typeface as the existing tablet. And we would also propose means by which we can clean and preserve the monument itself. The last time the tablet was replaced on the monument with new names added was in 1915. So this would be the first time in 107 years that the tablet would be removed. We are currently in the process of reaching out to bronze foundries, also to companies that specialize in replacing the tablet, and also a concern that would be able to clean and preserve the monument. It does need cleaning, and in all probability, there are some cracks that might be in need of repair. The last time there was any repair work done on the monument itself was 1965, when some very modest work was done replacing some joints, repointing them. And that was a $400 project. So ultimately, this would be a three-step process. First, we would remove the existing tablet. And secondly, we would do the restorative work and then install the new plaque with Dugan's name placed on it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a marvelous story, a history, and quite an honor and quite a a task for all of you. Thank you. I had no idea. It had been 100 years since it was last touched. So I would assume we would have some sort of celebration or when we actually complete this.
Yes, we will. Date to be determined when we think it is safe to do that. We will have members of the 54th Massachusetts reenactors present for the dedication ceremony.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's to be determined.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much. I also know that you've been very helpful with working on the project over in West Concord. So thank you for your time and service for this. And we look forward to when it actually gets installed and the celebration, because that I assume means that we've got COVID a little bit under control. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
So it's been, thank you. We're going to turn to the Wright Tavern. I'm sorry, it's been a really long meeting. Tom Wilson is here to talk to us about the progress with the Wright Tavern, and specifically our task is really about the preservation restriction. That's the role that we have in this project. I know that they've been presenting before the Community Preservation Committee on a number of occasions. And the last time they were before us was over a year ago when they first spoke before the Historical Commission, and we asked them, ultimately, what is the purpose of your project and the future life of the Wright Tavern. So I turn it over to Tom, and I would just encourage you to be as succinct as possible. I know it's been a long night and you've waited a long time.
Thank you, Melissa. Actually, it's been quite interesting and quite a pleasure. And following Rick Fries is always difficult because he is such an articulate gentleman, and he's a good friend. So I would like to share my screen, and what I'm going to do is give you some information about where we are with the Wright Tavern, and to get this set up here. I'd like to take about 15 minutes or so and kind of go through this material. Now you have a copy of this, so I won't need to go through it a lot. And we'll be talking about a number of issues, and then we can allow another, say, 15 minutes or so for any kind of discussions or questions you might have. So if you can hold your questions till I get through this, then it'll be helpful for we can respond quickly, because it's late and we all appreciate what you're doing. So basically, I want to cover three key things. One is to give you a sense, once again, of the sort of a vision and the context, what it is that we're working on with the Right Tavern and what we hope we will all be able to have as a result of our efforts. I want to touch in a bit about what we've done in 2021, both the agreement that we have with the CPC and from the town, and then what the plans are for 22 and 23. Then obviously spend some time with the preservation restriction. I don't think there's a need for decisions related to that because you'll see in terms of the time frame and the tasks when you're going to be needing to be involved and where we'll need you to do that. And then I'd like to end by sort of a recap why we're doing this. And I think it's important when we go into a fairly complex project like this that we kind of keep a view about what it is that we're trying to get to. What's the vision? What's the point on the horizon as we go through this? So I look forward to hearing your comments as we go through this. Now, this is basically a who's on first kind of question, and it's in your materials. The Right Tavern was bequeathed to First Parish in 1882 and 1885, primarily because a lot of taverns were being torn down, and Reuben Rice and Judge Hoare felt that knew of its historical significance and gave it to First Parish for safekeeping since it was important to get out of their own sort of family. The First Parish has established a trustees for First Parish donations, which basically manages the properties, not the meeting house, but all the other properties, including the Right Tavern, to making sure that according to a lot of our own interests, that they are being cared for and properly maintained. About 2 years ago, there was a task force. Some of y'all came to some meetings that we had with them and lots of involvement, whatever. That task force has now evolved into what we have formed now as a Right Tavern Legacy Trust. It's a separate 501(c) nonprofit organization. I'm the chair of the board. You can see the members on the board. And we're putting together, I'll say, the team now that's going to be working with us as we go through the transformation or the renewal or the revelation of what the Right Tavern is about. And I'll talk about some of those people in a second. So the question is, what are we going to do with the Right Tavern? The Right Tavern, I think we all know this, is a very, very unique building in Concord. It's been closed for some odd 30 years, used as private offices, et cetera. First Parish has made a commitment to move it, bring it open and make it open to the public. But we want to go beyond just another historical building in this town. And so in our discovery and our deliberations with lots of people around town, is that we felt that the important vision, if you will, for the Right Tavern is to create it as a center for the exploration and renewal of democracy. And you'll explain what that, you'll see what that means in a minute. Therefore, we see the building open to the public in scheduled times, that we will be engaged in lots of reenactments and events that the town is doing, and that's been happening regionally and nationally. We want to use the building to host events and educational activities that help to explore what's the real meaning of democracy. Because what happened here with the Provincial Congress in 1774 was where essentially when Massachusetts broke away from Britain, became the first colony to do that, they chose to use democracy as a primary model of governance. And this all was planned and thought about and considered in the Right Tavern, and the decisions were made in the meeting house at the time. So we think it's an important place. That the structure itself is the real value. There's not a lot of material that's the same. It's gone through many life forms over that time. So our idea here is to take the first floor and make it into an engaging museum, one where people can come in and experience what the life was like at those times in different points in times in history. And we can also use it for meeting space. The second floor would be used for offices for the staff and as well as for our affiliates. It's a pretty large space. And so we want to make sure that it's used. It's not accessible to the public, and we don't want to go through what some taverns have gone to, is to do a lot of construction that would create a public access. So we're going to leave the second floor in order to preserve the building as a separate office space. And the third floor really is the attic, and we use it, if you will, for storage. And perhaps there's some things that researchers may find quite interesting. So that's what our vision is for the Right Tavern. Our goal is to have it open and fully operational by early 2024. The reason why is because the Revolution 250 celebration is on track. We met with Johnson Lane a couple weeks ago, and we're on track with them to hold a major reenactment of the Mass Provincial Congress. I can tell you about that if you're interested, in October of 2024. So we want to be ready to really embrace that celebration. And obviously 6 months later will be the reenactment of Patriots Day and the British advance on Concord, another very important part of it. And we want the Right Tavern to really be active, engaged in that process. And as we do this, the way we do this is to make sure that we are fulfilling our trust and our commitments to you and to other organizations as we go through this. This is a quick review of where we are on a time frame. So last year in 2020, there was a study so I figure out what we want to do. Last year, we formed a board. We started developing plans. We got some funding from the town. We're starting to identify where our priorities are. We're trying to build our plan of action. This year, we want to really drill down to exactly what we want to have happen in and with the building. So we're putting the teams together to analyze the issues in the building and analyze what kind of design we want to have for how we want to use the space. So we see lots of work. And then we'll probably start the repairs in the September of this, depending on what to get on contractors or whatnot, because we have tenants in the building now, and those tenants are slated to be moving out in August of this year. So we really can't do any major work until September. What's wonderful about that is it gives us some time now to really do the right job and really put our plans together. So next year will be much more of the demolitions, getting much more marketing, building some programs. 2024, we're having the reenactment. 2025, more reenactments, more future. So I won't spend too much with this because this is really more CPC, but in case you were interested, I can answer questions about this. Our funding priorities have been, first of all, dealing with the structural stability. There are some major issues with the building. It's not that it's unsafe. It's just not sustainable if we got a serious snowfall or whatever. But we're looking at the roof and the structures and a lot of other things. And then we're looking secondarily about what we need to do for a change in use. So it's not used as an office anymore. We need to make sure that it could perhaps take as many as 10 or 15,000 or 20,000 people through the building in a given year, not at one time, but during a given period. So we want to make sure the building is sustained. And then we look at ways we developing programs and the sort of experiences, like I say, when you go into the Right Tavern. So far, the work we have done with town, with the agreement, there were 5 critical pieces to it. One is focus on the structural stability. Second is put the team of experts together and with a strong emphasis on the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, people who have experience in that, do photographic logs, and bring to you and to the HPC a full set of plans and specifications for what we're going to do before we start the big work. And then obviously to establish a preservation restriction and agreement, and that's something that will be important. What we've done so far is we're putting a team together. We've got some great people working with us. Larry Surley is actually on the call. I asked him to join us tonight. He's been pivotal to our work. As Stephen Mallory he was part of the original structures report that was done in 2014, and there are other people who are involved. Also, we are in the final selection process of a preservation architect who will basically serve as a project lead for the work that we're going to be going on. And this is a person who is deeply knowledgeable of all the standards and things that do and works essentially exclusively with historic buildings. I'll tell you, I'm not really at liberty to talk about who that is right now because we're in those negotiations. Interested, I can show you the RFP, but I'll do that later. We did an inventory of some of the things that were in the basement and the attic. We've also moved them, those things that were important to be in a safe location as we start to do the work so we can make sure the things are protected. And then we've been examining the structural conditions of the building and also what are the critical elements that we want to make sure are preserved. And finally, we're in the process of developing a long-range plan and a funding strategy. As you can imagine, what the funding is going to be to take on a project of this nature and this magnitude. Our plans for 23, this next 2 years, is, as I said earlier, is getting the plans together over the next 6 months. And, it may take longer than that, and things usually do take longer than you want, but we want to get those things in place. And part of that process is to do an inventory of all of the historic elements. So we know what is historic, what was its timing, and how important is that particular element. So we talk about certain features in the building. What are they? And we can really work from the discussions, because I know many of you are very concerned about those elements, is that we know what we can start. We have a foundation of facts we can work with about what it is, how important is it, and whatever. So we have very much in our plans almost a priority to start building that kind of an inventory, if you will. It's just finalizing the plans, starting to get all these various elements together. So that we can do some repairs now in a way that are necessary to shore up the building, but really the emphasis would start to occur after we got approval of the plans with you and the CPC, and moving forward to a September build date. So that leads us to the preservation restriction. We do have a commitment, and it's in part of the agreement in 2021, that we will have a preservation restriction that deals with both the exterior and interior conditions. We did a draft of a PR that was basically I'll call it the boilerplate, the sort of packaging around it, and it dealt with a lot of the exterior stuff. It did not deal with the interior, because the interior is actually quite challenging. If you all probably know better than I do, that the preservation restrictions often lock in what is there. Heather sent me the Wheeler House preservation restriction, and it's a great document. And also I've read several others, and they say this is the sort of existing conditions. The trouble is we don't want to keep the same conditions, because it's an office and it looks like an office. So we need to really identify what is it that we want to preserve and what is important we want to retain. And the reason that's important to us and you is that this is how we can showcase this building to people who are visitors are coming. We want to be able to tell people what it is about. We expect to see people who are interested in researching buildings like that to come in. We'll welcome them to take a look at a building. So it's really important for us to preserve all of those particular elements. We've also found an attorney that she's quite knowledgeable, who really can help us from a legal point of view now develop a PR. And she has indicated a lot of interest in talking with you all. There's the firm. And that, as I said, we want to get an agreement with you about what is historical, what needs to be preserved, what needs to be showcased, how can we handle it, different things, because we're dealing with both structural issues to make the building to last for centuries, hopefully, at least decades, not centuries, and be able to preserve the things that are there. So those are all elements that are involved in our process. We don't have to bring it to you today, because our agreement is that we will have a draft PR for you to review prior to submitting our plans and specifications. And that's intended what we wanted to do. And that's exactly what's important for us is moving this forward. Put the date to you, little dates on that. So the tasks we're working through related to the PR is we've been researching what are best practices, what are these programs really like, and how do they work inside organizations, and how do they actually strengthen relationships. Second thing is that we'll identify really what is important to be preserved, what are the historical elements. Then we'll look at what kind of plans we want to do for the building, what's necessary from a both structural and a design experience point of view. Then we can sit together and put those two things together and say, all right, what do we want to preserve and what do we need to do for the building? And you'll notice there are certain points where we would like your involvement and engagement, because we need to and we have to, but also we want to, because we see working with you in the long term as a very important partner with us. So as we go through this process, we see a lot more engagement around with the PR and the language in the sort of May, June timeframe. And then once we kind of have an agreement, we'll take it to the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and when you have to do the drill through them as well, and then submit it to the town in June. So just to step back for a second, and I'm trying to keep to my close to 15 minutes, about a minute over. Why are we doing this? I think we all have the same view about what we want to Right Chapter. We all recognize its historical importance. we all want to see it open to the public and open to in a way that is really which Concord can be very proud of. We also recognize that the town has a lot of historic buildings. What is it that's unique about the Wright Tavern? I think what's unique about it is not the stuff that's in it. It's the building itself and what happened here about 250 years ago. And so using it as a center for democracy is a way to really give this building an opportunity to have a national reputation. And that's something to be very important for the town as we begin to look through that. Also, we're making what I call once in a lifetime investments. There have been 22 life forms that this building has gone through, and many of them those times have been pretty dramatic in terms of the changes. We're trying to build it back, if you will, to what it was, what we intended it to be, what we want it to be. And so we see a lot of investments necessary, both from the town and from a lot of private investors. And finally, frankly, we don't do this alone. We see this as part of an ongoing process of collaboration with you all, with the CPC, with a lot of other talent people in town, as well as others who are experts in these fields, can help us build something that everybody is proud of. So I want to close by sharing with you probably the earliest picture I've been able to find of the Wright Tavern, somewhere with one indication is around 1850. You can see what the Wright Tavern looked like, 150 years ago. And here's what it looks like today. Well, colors changed. It's been shaped a little bit different on that right-hand side, but it's amazing how much it is the same. It has not changed a lot. And I think that is something we can all be quite proud of. And one of the things that we think is going to be very important for our future.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much. It is a beautiful building and it's a wonderful history of all. And I know you've got some ambitious ideas, but again, our scope is really the preservation restriction.
Exactly.
I want to open up to everybody, but the one thing I really would like at some point is that we could visit the tavern,
Yeah,
go through it.
we'd love that.
I don't know in the age of COVID if we'd go as a group or if we would go one at a time. I kind of would defer to others' thoughts about that. But that's one thing I really would like to do is actually go through the building. So I'd like to open it up to other folks to ask questions of Tom.
And other people, Rosalind Bomberg is here, as well as Larry Sorley.
Yes. Any questions?
I guess I do. I know that I think maybe it was you or one of your associates came before the commission some time ago with regard to a grant application. And you showed some significant structural issues. I saw some photos in the basement,
right.
et cetera. I'm just curious, has any, I don't know if you got the grant or not, maybe I should know that, but has there been any structural issues since then? And you have any work proposed prior to the tenants going out in the basement to support what was failing at that point?
Right. I'm going to ask Larry to respond to that in more detail, but answer one of your questions. Yes, we did get the funding. So thank you, Town of Concord, for $260,000. There were a number of things. We have actually found some other things that are actually more important. The building's still safe because there are people who are occupying it. It's just not sustainable the way it's set up.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
And so I'll let Larry, if you want to respond a bit to Michael's questions.
Sure. Well, the question about work in the basement, that could actually proceed as soon as design work is done. But we spoke to the engineer today. He would like to, the issues are mainly in the roof. There's more structural issues that are more complex. And then in the basement, it's less complex because there aren't finished room. There's only one room that's finished down there.
Right.
And there's been a lot of reinforcement already. So there are old joists and old beams that are assisted with new ones. And this has been going on for years.
Right.
And he'll be looking at, every floor, under every room to make sure that it'll take the loads of, up to 50 people probably going through the house at one time and circulating.
Yeah.
So
I just didn't know if there was some remedial repairs that were done until your plans are finalized, and I hear what you're saying, so fine.
I think we'll wait to hear from the engineer more about that.
Okay.
Exactly. We have a philosophy of measure twice, cut once.
Right.
And while we're aware of some of the things that need to get done, we're trying to do it in a way that then it kind of goes along with also what is it we're trying to preserve, because that's an important part of our mission.
Okay, great. Great.
Thank
Good. Wonderful project.
Well, we're excited to share with you.
Yeah.
As I said, we'll be back in touch. We see this as a collaborative effort. And to your point, Melissa, how do we schedule to work with Heather to get the group together? Maybe it's in 2 groups of 3 or 4 people, and we can take you through it and show you what's there. And Nancy knows it quite well because she's been there a bunch of times. So maybe you can join us, be it as a tour guide. But should we work with Heather to get that, or is that the best way?
Well, I don't, I think maybe individually we could reach out to Heather and kind of let her know our availability. Would that make sense to you, Alan, Michael? I know Nancy, you know it very well.
Yeah. Let me suggest all maybe like 2 or 3 different times that we can then make, because we also have to sort of accommodate to the tenants that are there, so we're not messing the Compass Realty people are moving out, so it's less, and they occupy a lot of space. But so I'll get some dates to her tomorrow, and you guys can say, if you reach with her, it says pick one of the 3 options, and then we'll set it up.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Any other comments from anyone? This is just a report, so there's nothing, we're not voting on anything, we're just hearing. If there's no comments, then thank you, Tom. My
pleasure.
Nancy, yes.
I know Rosalind and Tom have heard a lot from me, and I still have a lot of skepticism about whether or not this project is ready for prime time. There has been virtually no progress on the last grant that was to address serious structural issues. The grant agreement also required the Wright Tavern folks to consult with the commission on the preparation development of a preservation restriction. I think that we could have been very helpful to you and made your life a lot easier had there been a collaborative effort at consultation. I know quite a bit about the historical architects and the historical conservator that's on your team. The conservator did the historic structures report, so could probably have helped you a year ago to identify the important characteristics. But I think you still have not really defined what the interior is going to look like, what the museum actually will be. I know also Larry Sorley has participated in other historic preservation projects in Concord, including the Thoreau birthplace, and I know he could tell you more. The thing that has concerned me is the lack of collaboration up till now, and in spite of the promises that were made, and then the involvement of the preservation folks in the development of the plans for addressing the structural issues. And if the PR comes after all the plans are developed, the language in the grant agreement does say that, but I think we had been anticipating a much more collaborative effort much earlier in the process, and to have seen the input from the historical end of your team. The engineering still looks like it looked over a year ago. So it's not clear, and it's still not clear to me how the building is going to be used for the public. So I'm sorry to have to say that again. I know you've heard it before.
It's okay.
I would also, you said you have developed a preservation restriction. Of course, it's just for the exterior, but you could have shared that with us, as a beginning. I appreciate that you're still inventorying the historic properties of the interior, but something.
Right. And we shared a very early version of it and got such negative reaction about it because it didn't deal with the interior, that we sort of backed away from it and said we need to get legal counsel before to make sure it's sort of like a prenup agreement. It's sort of like we want to not mess up a great relationship, at the same time really protect some of the things we're trying to do with the building. And so I think you're right in the sense that we probably have not reached out sufficiently to you all to do it. As part of the reason tonight I wanted to deal with more than just the PR is to sort of set the stage for doing much more work. And to the things that you're talking about, Nancy, is kind of what we're doing this springtime. And we didn't do it because this last year, because we were trying to get the team together and try to figure out who's on first and what the roles and responsibilities are going to be. So we've got a lot of work to do and some work to gear up. Very little work has been done on, and to some extent for purpose, because we want to make sure that we, as I say, measure twice, cut once as we go through this. But what you're describing, if you're still saying that, Nancy, 6 months from now, then
I think that would mean 1.5 years has gone by before seeing the tangible results, and it's a difficult thing because you're asking for over $500,000 this time, with more to come, but we don't know what the vision is yet. There's not a clear vision for what you're trying to do.
I thought my vision was clear enough to sort of say what we intend to do with it, but it needs to.
Well, there's not much meat on the bones.
It needs more definition, and that's what a plan is all about. That's why we're hiring a designer to help us figure exactly what's going to happen in each room and what it will look like when each room as we go through this.
Okay, well, thank you. So I think we all look forward to hearing about that.
Could Larry maybe tell us a little bit more about the projects he's worked on in town? And I wonder why you haven't used your historical team to help you develop a draft PR, but Larry, I know, has worked on a lot, and Stephen's not here, so I don't know.
Well, actually, I'd like to ask the commission. Well, the commission will be holding basically they're the enforcers of preservation restrictions. And how many of those do you actually have in Concord right now? I know you have the town is armed with a Wheeler Minot House, but are there others?
The church.
The church, the Thoreau Farm Trust, the Thomas Mott Shaw House on Garfield Road, or off of Garfield Road.
And one had been developed for Barrett's, Colonel James Barrett House, when Save Our Heritage owned the property, and that was quite well developed. But
that was after the restoration, right? Do you have interior restrictions on those buildings?
Yeah, but the commission never had to oversee that because it was transferred to the National Park.
Okay, so my question really is, how would you like to see, if you have to be, the enforcers? And I've worked with Historic New England and their stewardship program, talked to those people several times. They actually go out and they go to the properties twice a year, and they have an endowment to do that. Whether there's work done or not, they go out to make sure that everything's being enforced. So with the building as complex as this, with so many rooms, would you like to see a floor plan with room numbers and door numbers and window numbers, and then like a verbal thing that says, room 101 in the first floor, the east wall paneling, that sort of thing? What's going to be easiest for you as enforcers of the preservation restriction?
Don't you already have some of that in the HSR? Actually, I
know.
No,
well, the problem is, the way I see this, just briefly, is that there are primary character defining features, and then there are secondary ones, and then there are ones that aren't really important at all. So I'm not even sure if they have to be mentioned.
Okay.
But there are two periods of significance here. There's the colonial period up to, around 1785 or 90, when Jarvis got a hold of it. And that's when it stopped being a tavern. And that's when, around from 1790 to about 1825, half of the house was demolished practically on the inside. And, you know, it's not going to be interpreted as a home for Deacon Jarvis. It wants to be interpreted as a, you know, a place where other things happened in an earlier period. So there's really not left in the house that dates from 1774 and 1775.
Right.
So it makes it a little difficult for me, you know, in setting up these restrictions. I mean, obviously I'd want to save mantles and fireplaces and chimneys that were done in the 1820s, but, you know, they're not going to, you know, how they're going to be interpreted. That's up to the exhibit designer in this case. So, I mean, I think, you know, probably we should meet and talk about all of this, because I think you need to know, you need to find out the best way that it's going to work for you and us as well, you know, going forward on this. And, you know, as we open things up for structural reasons, we're going to find areas that, you know, maybe can't be. And I'll say, quite frankly, I think the rooms in the attic might have to be demolished, because there's a very serious problem with 4 posts that are coming down on the first floor. And I want to put beams on the attic floor so nothing is touched in the public areas, and, you know, even the private areas. I'm basically saying that, you know, no one is ever going to be able to go up in the attic in public, or not even on the second floor. But I don't want beams exposed, you know, steel beams on the second floor ceilings. Everything would have to be done in the attic. So in other words, we're sacrificing the attic, you know, for, you know, to preserve what we can on the second floor, where, you know, people are going to be working and seeing the structure. So it's things like that. And, you know, I think you could always do wording in the preservation restriction that, you know, it isn't fast and hard. If things have to be done, you know, to structurally make the house sound after the fact, you might have to back away from some of these restrictions. And that's why you have the priority of what's most important, what's secondary important, and, you know, what is least important.
That's why it was a draft
Exactly.
that was requested. So we could
Yeah.
have a conversation about all the things that you're talking about.
But before you do a draft, it's almost like, you know, how do you want, you know, what's the best way to set it up for you to review it and understand it? Because we can just list a lot of things, but if you're not in the building, so I think maybe the floor plan is the way to go. We didn't really do that with the Thoreau birth house. It was more just a verbal description, which I think might be useless, you know, in a way.
Yeah.
So I think, you know,
Well, I just have to say, I think just what you've said has given me much more information than I feel I had. I think knowing the period you want to interpret is critical. And I presume it's the time of the late 1770s and 8 to 80, but and whatever else in the early 19th century they can preserve. But I think, Larry, just what you've said has given me more structure than I had understood before.
Okay, great.
I don't know how you approach writing one of these. I've certainly, you know, I've just read them, but I think it would help for all of us, as I said before, to go see the building and to understand what you're really talking about and why you would say you would sacrifice the attic. And to understand what it is you're turning this into and how the preservation restriction will then preserve
Right.
the elements that will then be perhaps altered.
Yeah, I don't, the thing is, it's already been remodeled for adaptive. We're dealing with 3 different, you know, standards. There's preservation, there's restoration, and there's rehab. And the rehab, a lot of the rehab's already been done. And, you know, we're not going to preserve the rehab. So there could be walls that are more modern that could be torn down. And of course, I wouldn't even mention them in a preservation restriction, because some of the walls were never there, even in the second important period when Jarvis was there. So it's very complicated, and you know, you could simplify it, but I think, you know, you're going to see right away when you go in there, obviously, what is important, and it's mainly the rooms that face Lexington Street. There are 2 rooms on the first floor, 2 rooms on the second. Everything towards the south side of the house has been ruined by Jarvis, number 1, and then several times since then by all of the innkeepers and hair bomb manufacturers and everything. There was even a speakeasy in the basement. I read it at one point. So.
Well, definitely preserve that.
Absolutely.
Well, one thing I just have to point out, what's been presented to the CPC was a slide that talked about recreation of a 17th and 18th century tavern. Now the language is much more, tonight, it's much more about a museum. So I hope you can see why there's a lot of confusion about, at this point in time, about what this is actually going to be and what are we funding. I'm speaking as CPC person, but there's not, right now, there's no there. There's only hope, aspiration, promises, and lots of good talk. But where's the meat? That's what I'm looking for.
Where's the beef?
Where's the beef? Yeah, where's the beef? So that's, I think, I think this is a fabulous building and a fabulous opportunity. So
yeah,
I just think you might be getting ahead of yourself. I think I've said that before.
But
focus on the critical repairs.
Yeah.
And get those done and show a good team and the involvement of the historic folks who can tell you what wall was 1970 and it doesn't matter, whatever. But to rely on the professionals that you have, I think would be very reassuring to me.
Yeah, that's very much their intent. So
Thank you. I see Carlin Reed. Carlin?
Hi, Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. Nancy, I was attending the CPC meeting where you raised your serious objections on the proposal to fund the Right Tavern, and I share those objections as well and concerns. Now, based on what you've heard tonight, Nancy, has your opinion changed about the application for the Right Tavern?
Not really, because I'm looking for more progress in an initial way before we commit another $260,000 of public funds. I'm confused tonight about the absence of the statement about recreating a 17th, 18th century tavern and what that means. There's an assumption that they're going to need a wet fire suppression system. Maybe that's not what you need if you have a museum with artifacts. I don't think there's enough specificity to the proposal to know what actually we're funding.
Can I just say something really quick? I think what Right Tavern people are looking for is, I think in these two requests for funding, it won't be for that kind of work. It's going to be for the roof structure, the basement, masonry. Tom has done a spreadsheet, which I'm sure he's going to share at some point, maybe at the next CPC meeting. When you look at that, there's nothing there for, recreating a tavern or, design development of exhibitry. That's going to be worked on, as we go along.
Well, we've already funded, is that critical structural stabilization work. And what's in the second request is mostly for the second floor, or a lot of it is for the second floor as well as for the sprinkler system and
rewiring and stuff like that, but it wouldn't be for, carpeting or, that sort of thing. I think this, we probably should wait till we have the CPC meeting to go over those items.
Yeah, thank you. Because those are very serious issues, but this is not within the realm of the Historical Commission,
right.
And it's been a long night.
Yeah, sorry.
So I thank you, Tom, for your presentation, and I know this will be taken up in depth with the CPC, which is what, next week? I think you have another meeting.
Tuesday.
I think, Heather, can we just postpone the minutes until next time and call it a night? Or I can ask, actually, for those members of the commission, I'm going to skip over other business and go to minutes. Did everyone read the December 9th minutes, and may we approve them? Do I have
I make a motion, we approve them.
a second from Nancy? All in favor, roll call. Nancy?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Alan? Aye. Melissa? Aye. Okay, so we've approved them. Heather, December 9th, approved.
Thank you.
I know.
Thank you, Heather.
So
Quickest approval ever.
I'm sorry?
Quickest approval ever.
Yeah, yeah. So our next meeting is January 26th at 7 o'clock. That will be to go over hopefully the final language for the warrant article. We'll send out a Zoom invite in advance. And I think I will ask to a motion to adjourn.
Make
So
a
moved.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, second,
Thank you
third,
all.
fourth.
I think this is our
Fifth.
longest one. This is almost 3 hours.
Okay.
It's my second 3-hour meeting.
A second. I would just say to Chessie, it's not normally this long.
Yeah.
You're not official.
It's very
You wanna back
exciting.
out.
Yeah.